Without Zen Masters, Camden, Benares, with commentary by Robert Anton Wilson, illustrated by Deborah M. Cotter and /or Press, Berkeley, California. Preface. In my search for an understanding of Zen, some of my first questions were, what is Zen? What can it do for me? How do I get into it? The following statements are my current best answers to those questions. Zen is the radical approach to Buddhism. Historically, Zen arose as a Buddhist sect resulting from a blend of Buddhism and Taoism. According to some traditions, Zen came into being with the meeting of Buddha and Lao Tse about 2,500 years ago. However, most authorities believe Zen developed in China in the 6th century of the Common Era when Indian Buddhist missionaries encountered Taoists. Zen spread to Japan via China and Korea in the 12th and 13th centuries, and from Japan to the West at the beginning of the 20th century. What Zen has done for me is to clarify and liberate my state of consciousness. Zen offered a way of experiencing life directly, a way of learning who I was and how I wanted to live. There are two approaches to getting into Zen. The formal approach is to study with a Japanese Zen master. The informal approach is an individual study program using whatever materials are available. The informal approach results in what I call Western Zen. I see it as the next step in the radical Zen tradition. Zen without Zen Masters represents my attempt to share Western Zen with you. This book may create questions in the minds of some readers. Are the Zen stories real? Many of the stories, including some of the most improbable sounding ones, are taken verbatim from life. Others are real events revised and edited for a more meaningful presentation. A few are based on hearsay from sources that vary in reliability. A small minority are Zen in parable form. Do the exercises and meditation guides work? To the best of my knowledge and experience, they do. This doesn't mean that they will work for everyone at all times. Your experience should be your guide. I have no wish for you to do anything that doesn't produce results for you. What is the purpose of this book? My words about Zen are intended to aid you in getting more out of life. But neither these words nor their meaning is Zen, because Zen is the reality behind the meaning. This book is one tool to help you experience that reality in its fullness. Table of Contents. Preface. 7 Counterpoint by Robert Anton Wilson. 11 I Guides and Lovable Fools. 15 Solitary System. 16 Masters and Teacher. Commentary. Say the magic word and the duck will come down and pay you $100. Marks. Many readers of Illuminatus have asked me why Hagbard Celine used the letters HM and SH after his name and what these mysterious initials meant. I have always evaded these questions in the past because I was not at all sure that Hagbard wanted this story revealed. However, in Zen without Zen Masters, Camden Benares has blatantly disclosed all the inner secrets of mysticism, and he even reveals the early incident in Hagbard's life from which the initials HM and SH derive. The story is called Enlightenment of a Seeker and is on page 40. Others have often asked me if all the characters in Illuminatus really existed. Indeed they do. The enigmatic Malaklis the Younger in Illuminatus is the same individual as Mai in Zen without Zen Masters. See, for instance, Mai's Truth on page 18. The philosophy expressed in this book, also called Discordianism or Erasianism or even Marxism-Leninism * is a group artwork, like reality itself. Camden Benares didn't invent it any more than I did, or Mai did, or Ho Chi Zen did. Like Topsy in Uncle Tom's Cabin, or the universe around us, it just grew. Some say that the first originate theologian was Zeno of Elias, who proved that an arrow can never hit its target, because first it must travel half the distance to the target, and before that it must travel half of that distance, or the original distance, and before that it must travel half of that distance or 1/8 of the original, etc., to infinity. Others say the first origin was really Sri Syadasti, the Hindu sage who announced that all affirmations are true in some sense, false in some sense, meaningless in some sense, true and false in some sense, true and meaningless in some sense, false and meaningless in some sense, and true and false, and meaningless in some sense. But this is denied by those who claim Sri Syadasti is not to be found in Hindu scripture * named after Groucho and John, of course. A basic discussion koan is why don't we do it in the road? And was actually invented by the mischievous Ho Chi Zen. It does seem fairly well documented that an Eurasian missionary arrived in the Bay Area of California in 1849 and took the name Norton I, with the title Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico. Norton was immediately recognized as an illuminated being by the foremost occult order in San Francisco, the ancient and accepted Freemasons, who granted him a 33 degrees and buried him, at his death in 1880, in the Masonic cemetery. It is fairly well established that, although a pauper, Norton I was allowed to dine sumptuously in the best restaurants of San Francisco. Although a lunatic, he wrote letters which were seriously considered by such folk as Abraham Lincoln and Queen Victoria, and, although a charlatan, he was so beloved that 30,000 turned out for his funeral. When the Committee of Vigilance, in an impetuous mood, set out to burn down Chinatown on one occasion, Norton I dispersed them by merely standing in the street, head bowed, praying. As Lao Tse says, when the proper man does nothing, Wu Wei, his thought is felt 10,000 miles. Malaklis the Younger has indicated Norton F's importance, writing in his infamous Principia Discordia, everybody understands Mickey Mouse. Few understand Hermann Hesse. Hardly anybody understands Einstein. And nobody understands Emperor Norton. Mordecai the Foul, high priest of the head temple of the Bavarian Illuminati, says of Norton with simple awe, live like him. What is the central truth behind Marxism-Leninism, Arisianism, Discordianism, Zen without Zen masters? On this point, our leading 8 theologians are in agreement and disagreement, as might be expected. Mai says, simply, God is a crazy woman and her name is Eris. Ho says more abstractly and less figuratively, hell is reserved exclusively for them that believe in it. Camden says concisely, if we believe enough, there will be what amores. Do we really want any? Mordecai the Foul merely exclaims Fnord, and hits you with a stick if you ask again. But, seriously, folks, as Bob Hope always says, Zen without Zen masters, like all the other aspects of Operation Mindfuck, is not a complicated joke disguised as a new form of Buddhism. It is a new form of Buddhism disguised as a complicated joke. Guerrilla ontology. Epistemological judo. If you don't laugh at all, you've missed the point. If you only laugh, you've missed your chance for illumination. As Lichtenberg said elsewhere, this book is a mirror. If a monkey looks in, no philosopher looks out. Hail Eris. O.M. Fnord. Robert Anton Wilson. I Guides and Lovable Fools. Solitary system. There are many individuals who are liberated or who appear to be so. Some of them seek disciples because they have not heeded Nietzsche, who said, "What? You seek followers? You would multiply yourself by 10, by 100, by 1,000. Seek zeros. Remember this and know that any system of liberation may work once, for one individual." Masters and teachers. When asked about masters and teachers, Ho Chi Zen always had this to say, the old fox can learn more from the young fool than the young fool can ever hope to learn from the old fox. 4-3. Mal's truth. When an interviewer asked Mai if his teaching was serious or humorous, Mai replied, "Sometimes I take humor seriously and sometimes I take seriousness humorously. Either way it is irrelevant." The interviewer responded by proposing that Mai was crazy. Mai grinned and said, "Indeed. But don't reject these teachings just because I am crazy. I am crazy because they are true." In his teachings, Ben stressed that Zen was his path because it allowed him to become himself. All the other routes that allegedly lead to cosmic consciousness seemed to put him in conflict with his own nature. He advised all seekers to examine carefully what each system asked of the potential initiate, keeping in mind 3 rules. 1. What you are required to believe is what the system cannot prove. 2. Anything that brings up the pleasures of the senses will produce a different consciousness. My personal experience, Ben replied, was that it produced the consciousness of fanaticism. Audience response. Ben was once asked how he expected anyone to take some of his teachings seriously when they provoked so much laughter from his listeners. He replied, "Laughter is the only genuine form of applause." A common disease. By surrounding himself with true believers, Waldo fell into the trap of taking himself too seriously. This led to unhappiness and ill health. When he asked Ralph, one of the few who had penetrated his multilevel cover stories, what he thought the problem was, Ralph replied, "You're suffering from hardening of the orthodoxies." Pop quiz. Ralph, like many others in the Rascal Guru tradition, exploits the credulousness of his students as much for his own amusement as for their edification. When anyone asks how he accumulated so much wisdom, he usually pulls their leg by implying that he has been here for several centuries. Swallowing that statement without a gulp, one student replied, "It's amazing how human you are." Without a pause, Ralph responded, "After 1,000 years or so you go native." Ho Chi Zen School. When Ho Chi Zen decided to take students, he put a bowl for donations just inside the door. Over the small brass container was a sign that read, "If you wish to donate, do so before class." Habitually, Ho Chi Zen stood where he could see which student donated and which student did not as they entered. Asked why he did so, Ho explained, "Any student who contributes 3 times in a row is dismissed for excessive gullibility." Dr. Zen Omar was associated with a very unusual black man whom he referred to as Dr. Zen. Anyone who tuned in on Dr. Zen thought he was either crazy or very detached. Omar believed that Dr. Zen was quite literally a Christian Zen practitioner. When Omar learned that Dr. Zen advertised himself as a biblical analyst, he asked him how many times he had read the Bible. "Oh," he answered, "I've never read the Bible. I don't need to read it. If you understand just one verse in the Bible, you understand it all." An onlooker asked, "Which verse is that?" Dr. Zen replied, "Jesus wept." A ringing in the ears. A celibate member of a traditional Zen sect once asked Ho Chi Zen if he had taken any vows. After the great acceptance has been made, Ho replied, "All vows tinkle like tin bells." Hypoke's earring. During a social evening at Hypoke's home, Mai, commenting on the gold earring Hypoke wears in his left ear, asked if anyone knew why a single earring, when worn, is invariably worn in the left ear. Bert said that merchant seamen wear an earring in the left ear to signify that they have crossed the equator. This led into a discussion concerning the possible symbolic significance of a mystical crossing of a personal equator. The talk touched on other points such as the left ear representing the individual freedom found on the left side of conformity and of the association of the left ear with the occult. When the discussion waned, Mai asked Hypoke why he wore the earring in his left ear. Hypoke replied, "I like to sleep on my right ear." Lucas's meditation. After learning transcendental meditation, Lucas taught the simple techniques to anyone who expressed an interest. Unlike many meditation teachers, he charged no money, asking only that meditators give him something of value in return for his time. Instead of an elaborate ritual in a foreign language, Lucas gave a quiet talk on the way to empty the mind of its chatter while candles burned and incense filled the room. One learner asked, "Why should I empty my mind?" Lucas, rephrasing Lao Tse, replied, "Wheels without empty centers cannot be used to haul, and the empty part of the bowl makes it useful for holding food." An older student came to Otis and said, "I have been to see a great number of teachers and I have given up a great number of pleasures. I have fasted, been celibate and stayed awake nights seeking enlightenment. I have given up everything I was asked to give up and I have suffered, but I have not been enlightened. What should I do?" Otis replied, "Give up suffering." Peter and the Japanese Zen Master. Peter, an actor and teacher, went to a Zen lecture on the campus where he taught. A philosophy professor introduced the speaker, a Japanese Zen Master, and the speaker's associate. Speaking in English, the Zen Master announced that he would deliver the lecture in Japanese and that it would be translated into English by his associate, who had a better command of English. Peter asked the Zen Master to speak in English, saying that the Zen Master's English was excellent and that the associate could clarify any confusion during the discussion period. Looking at Peter, the Zen Master asked, "Who are you?" Peter replied, "I am an actor." The Zen Master said, "Then you act," and left the lecture room. The Zen temple attendant Jefferson went through despair, came out on the other side, and began to develop a new life. He spent his time taking care of his body and mind as one, instead of two. When he learned that there was a Zen temple near, he went to it and presented himself. The attendant told Jefferson to go home because the proper time for new students to come was posted. He said, "Now is not the time. I am not ready to receive a new student." Jefferson knew that now is the only time, and he understood that the attendant wasn't ready. Hos first sermon by listening carefully to the words of teachers and leaders of all kinds and then more or less doing as I pleased, by avoiding both belief and doubt, and by letting my desires and attachments tumble out in whatever order they attained among themselves, I have managed quite resolutely to overcome all temptations and remain in accord with the Tao. But it hasn't been easy, for the path climbs a steep, slippery rock and meanders incessantly. And also one never knows but what the Buddhas and patriarchs were not the fools they must have been. Besides, the true way could be as inorganically straight and narrow as they insisted. Yet the perfect seer will persist in the knowledge that any road traveled in harmlessness and devotion is the peerless instructor. Gladys and the Zen Master. In her search for Zen, Gladys went to a Japanese monastery where she spent several months. Continually asking the Zen Master, "What is Zen?" she received no answer. To show how humble she was, Gladys cleaned the communal bathrooms. The Zen Master was not impressed and she felt humiliated. When Gladys realized that if she wanted to clean bathrooms she could do that anywhere, she decided to leave. She told the Zen Master of her decision. He replied, "That is Zen." Advance from the retreat. Looking for personal growth, Jane went to a rural retreat for a few weeks. The fee she paid entitled her to room and board plus instructions from a guru. As in many such places, students were used as slave labor for the good of the guru, who would tell them their labors were for their development. When Jane felt that she had nothing more to learn from manual labor, she told the guru that his training program was a masochist's delight and all-day suffer. He responded with, "You must get beyond pleasure." Jane answered, "If you think you can get beyond pleasure without going through it, we are definitely on different trips," and left. The artist's enlightenment. An artist, depressed and almost unable to paint, consulted Sam, a Zen-oriented therapist, for aid in coping with his problems. He asked what the fee would be, explaining that his income had dwindled since he was doing fewer paintings. Sam said his fee would be 2 paintings. The first, to be titled Despair, was to be completed before the therapy began. The second was to be titled By the Artist and was to be started when the therapy ended. The artist painted Despair and presented it to Sam, who looked at it and then threw it into the blazing fireplace. The artist walked out. He returned a few days later with the second painting. Expensive advice. Omar and Giovanni were planning a joint venture that looked as if it might make them both some money. Having a genuine horror toward what middle-class money does to most people, Omar hesitated and asked, "What the hell will I do if this scheme makes me rich? I'm not eager to handle that." Giovanni replied, "Omar, I've always given you lots of advice that you've never taken. If you get rich, I'll just start giving you expensive advice. You can take it, have lots of interesting experiences and get rid of money." "That sounds good, but give me a concrete example. Let's say I had $15,000 to get rid of. What should I do? You know that famous guru who's hung up on fast cars? Okay, you buy the Italian sports car I was looking at yesterday. Then we drive down to where he lives. When he comes to the door, you give him the keys and say, 'This is your new car. We hope you enjoy it, and then we walk off. He'll call us back for an explanation and we'll tell him it's his with no strings attached. Then he'll say, isn't there something I can do for you? You'll look thoughtful and say, well, there is one thing. Could you drop us off at the nearest bus stop? Voting Smitty described the following voting system to Omar. Each candidate would have a yes and a no box after his or her name, allowing each voter a choice between voting for a candidate or voting against another one. Each negative vote would cancel a positive vote. This, Smitty explained, would prevent a politician who was elected from assuming he had a mandate just because a few voters found him a better gamble. When he asked Omar what he thought of the system, Omar replied, I never vote. It only encourages them // vote today. The right to die, a potential suicide, was talking to Ho Chi Zen, asking if he had the right to commit suicide if he wanted to. Ho replied, anyone has a right to do anything. Everyone else has the right to resist it. The student said, do you see suicide as a moral act? Ho's answer was, where there is no victim, every act is morally right, but I personally think suicide is a symptom of taking oneself too seriously. Obstacles. Giovanni told Omar that he was interested in Zen, but there were two obstacles in his path to liberation through Zen. 1. He couldn't understand most of what he had read about Zen. 2. He didn't believe that he could bring himself to make all the changes he felt he would have to make in his actions if he embraced Zen. Omar told him to read Alan Watts' books on Zen and then reread everything that he hadn't understood before. That will take care of the first obstacle, Omar said, and the second is merely an obstacle illusion. You do not make your actions conform to some arbitrary standard. Your actions reflect you. In Zen, you and your actions are one. The priest and actor picked up a hitchhiker who revealed that he was a Catholic priest who had left the church. Explaining his current situation, the former cleric said, I'm living with a woman. I love her and we want to get married. This morning 2 representatives of the church came to where I live. They told me to appear at a hearing in San Francisco to determine my relationship to the church. I told them that I'm doing God's will, but they didn't believe me. Do you believe me? The actor replied, yes, I believe you. As part of my preparation to become an actor, I studied Zen. One of the things I learned is that if God's actions appear irrational and inconsistent, you must remember that he is playing to the broadest possible audience. A serious young man found the conflicts of mid-20th century America confusing. He went to many people seeking a way of resolving the discords that troubled him, but he remained troubled. One night in a coffee house, a self-ordained Zen minister said to him, go to the dilapidated mansion you will find at the address which I have written down for you. Do not speak to those who live there, you must remain silent until the moon rises tomorrow night. Go to the large room on the right of the main hallway, sit in the lotus position on top of the rubble in the northeast corner, face the corner and meditate. He did as the Zen minister instructed. His meditation was frequently interrupted by worries. He worried whether or not the rest of the plumbing fixtures would fall from the second floor to join the pipes and other trash he was sitting on. He worried how would he know when the moon rose on the next night. He worried about what the people who walked through the room said about him. His worrying and meditation were disturbed when, as if in a test of his faith, effluvium fell from the second floor onto him. At that time 2 people walked into the room. The first asked the second who the man sitting there was. The second replied, some say he is a holy man. Others say he is a shithead. Hearing this, the man was enlightened. Ho Chi Zen confides again asked what was the purpose of Zen. Ho said, by the study of Zen one can learn to help people or, that failing, at least to get them off your back. 2. Personal work. The most important work you will ever do is upon yourself. Any occupation you engage in can be used for that purpose, but not necessarily for a lifetime. Since most of us select from visible alternatives, we avoid confronting our fears and become what we are least afraid of becoming. Now is the time to understand those fears so we can get on with our personal work. Living Zen, I have made all the right choices. I chose the right path based on my ability to choose. I am in the right place. There is no other place for me to live my life, and I could not live the life of another, for it would not fit, it would not remain another's life, but become mine. Instant enlightenment, that sudden awareness, the awakening of the Buddha within, can come in an instant. The experience might be triggered by a concept, a word, an event, a koan, a meditation, or anything else perceived in its fullness. It's quite a bit like the overnight success in show business. It's frequently preceded by years of hard work. Focus. You are personally responsible for your continued existence. There are many ways of focusing your attention elsewhere, but to really experience your life, the focus must be on you as the center of the perceived universe. You may devote as much time as you wish to causes as long as you don't use them as an excuse for trying to change others instead of yourself. Anytime that you are doing something that you think is not for you, re-examine both your thinking and your actions. If it isn't for you, you're fooling yourself or doing it wrong. Change. Life is a continuing process of change. Resistance to change and personal growth is one of the most difficult ways to attempt to live because it requires a denial of the process. One of the hazards of refusing to accept change in yourself is getting locked into the habit of trying to change others so you can have the illusion of remaining the same. That way of living will take all your energy and yield no personal returns. Why waste your energy on changing others? You can use it to flow with the changes that are happening to you and enjoy the unfolding of your own life. Pralaya's wisdom. Having had a vision that revealed that he would travel to truth by an unexpected path, Pralaya investigated several blind alleys in a quest for liberation. Asked how he avoided discouragement, he said, "In learning the yoga of tying shoelaces with the teeth, one must accept that sometimes the foot will be in the mouth. Who's in charge here? You are the creator of the reality that you experience. Every event that occurs around you takes on meaning when you put your attention on it. During your lifetime you have been exposed to a lot of conditioning, but you have selected what seemed valid to you and made it part of your programming. If reality is getting you down, examine the programming that is in the biocomputer you call your mind. That programming can be changed at any time because you are your own programmer." Living in the here and now is concentrating on the present in accordance with one's own nature. It is not ignoring the future, but a recognition of the ignorance of future events. Rather than an abandonment of responsibility, it is the full acceptance of who you are, where you are and what you are doing. Welcome to the here and now. Everything that you have experienced has been necessary to get you where you are now. If you think that you have been in a better place, stop looking backwards. Hin4I positioning. Living in the here and now can be done without an investment in the status quo. Be aware that inherent in your identity is a high degree of adaptability. That should be your focus whenever you become attached to the place to which you have adapted. Making a drastic change to stay where you are always puts you in another place. /F. There is always a choice in your course of action, although you may have been conditioned to believe otherwise. One of the best ways to decide which choice to make is to list all the alternatives that you can think of while bearing in mind that nothing is unthinkable. Divide those alternatives into two categories: direct and indirect. The latter represent those choices that require getting other people on your trip. The direct choices need only your action. If you can't find a direct course of action, rethink the entire situation. Everyone learns the same lessons. From a cosmic point of view, the same thing happens to everybody. Each individual has had experiences that taught him or her a lesson that had to be learned. If someone is stuck in a behavior pattern that provides little happiness, the pattern will continue for as long as is necessary to teach the individual what there is in that pattern. That must be learned. $40. Jerry's religion. When Jerry was working toward an advanced degree in psychology, she attended an institution which had formerly educated only students of one particular religion. The change in the religious makeup of the student body caused "What's your religion?" to be one of the questions often asked of most new students. Jerry always responded to this query by saying, Zen Baptist. Some people heard only Baptist and Jerry related to them at that level. Other people heard only Zen and Jerry found them to be more interesting. A few heard what Jerry actually said, and those were the people that Jerry considered part of her peer group. Trouble-free action. Things were going so well for Giovanni that he had difficulty believing the reality he was experiencing. He seemed to have dropped all his hung-up habit patterns and was acting in a way that he didn't quite understand. To avoid the "this is too good to be true" paranoia, he asked Omar what he could tell him about the purpose of his new way of relating to the world. Omar said, "Don't worry about it. When you can't see through your own actions, you are operating at your highest level. Pay as you go. You are as free as you are willing to be. Each act of freedom is your choice. If you see the situation in terms of consequences from a personal point of view, you can determine the price of the act. The price may require that you change the image you present to the world, that is, change it in a way that makes it more like the person inside. The price may be giving up a burden that you have become accustomed to. Only you can determine the price, and only you can pay it. Trying to influence others so they will help pay the price for your freedom will rob you of it. Act directly. Experience life directly. That way you pay as you go and live in freedom. Continued use of your freedom can free you of the urge to control others. You may become free of the urge to change yourself." Bob's enlightenment. Having gone through a number of psychological and metaphysical changes, Bob felt that he was very different from most people he encountered. His acquaintances all seemed to be preoccupied with the distinctions between them and him. Finally, Bob began to believe that he was so strange that even people he hadn't met could detect an alienness about his appearance. To escape from this set of circumstances, Bob moved to a different city where he knew no one. Seeking employment, he went into an agency. As soon as he walked in the door, a man, who was talking with the manager, pointed at Bob and said, "He's just the one I'm looking for. Check him out." High manager walked over to Bob and said, "Do you know your way around the city?" "No." "That's too bad. This man is a private detective and he needs someone to follow people. He's been here most of the day waiting for the right person, someone who looks anonymous and can easily lose himself in a crowd. /s skills and talents. Let your skills and talents be your servants, not your masters. Orient your efforts toward the realistic requirements of the existing situation instead of *word construing the requirements to be the same as your capabilities. Vision. Ordinary vision would not be possible if the eye did not absorb light. Once the light has been absorbed, it is not seen again in the same form. This does not mean it ceases to function. One of the great uses for this light is self-illumination. 5 Changing times. You are a process of change. Your cells renew themselves periodically, old concepts are replaced by new, and your new being reflects life's experience. Flow with the changes. Be that new being. You don't give to make the person you used to be happy. Taking risks. Getting yourself in a position where you can't lose often puts you in a position where you can't win. Everyone takes a few risks in order to add spice to experiences. But the risk should always be gauged by what is wagered, not by what might be won. Good vibrations. Like vibrations attract. If you are getting a lot of bad vibes in your life, put your attention on what you are transmitting. What you send is what you get. V*1 Personal experience. Knowledge is superficial unless it is accompanied by personal experience. Since superficial knowledge is an unstable foundation for a way of living, Zen stresses becoming one with your experience. Thus, Zen can lead to an understanding that the standard of living has little to do with the quality of life. Lucas's search. Having been reared in poverty, Lucas aspired to middle-class comforts. After gaining some education and experience with the world, he did not lose his taste for comfort, but realized how little he prized the middle-class value system. Although he knew he could easily have one without the other, many of his acquaintances assumed that he aspired to both. To liberate himself from what he considered middle-class contamination, Lucas searched for a guru to guide him to a new level of consciousness. Ultimately, he realized that spiritual advisors often tell their clients to give up all their worldly possessions merely because they are not capable of teaching people how to enjoy them without becoming attached to them. This realization led Lucas to the knowledge that his search for liberation must begin inside himself. Through meditation, Sue found an inner source of strength and determination. By using these resources, she changed her life into a series of events that brought her happiness and success. For her, there is no conflict between orderliness and her free spirit. As she says, "I find freedom only through organization." The circle of truth. Once understanding has been reached, the understanding that ignorance will not guarantee the illusion of security, the search for truth can begin. But truth is not a constant. Like all other aspects of the greater reality, it is cyclic. A concept emerges from the great void as heresy, grows into truth, decays into superstition and returns to the void. Karma is the force exerted by a person's actions. It works in whatever manner an individual believes it does. In that sense, all karma is instant, just add belief. Everything that you learn about the world tells you how your brain works also, enabling you to perceive yourself in that which you consider not you. Rough understanding of this procedure will enable you to change the world by changing yourself. Inner space. When you are exploring the dark recesses of your mind, the people around you should be those holding the flashlight of acceptance. Sometimes you can recognize two qualities in these people: they know themselves, and they know that nothing is unthinkable. The subjective fallacy is, if it works for me, it will work for everyone. The objective fallacy is, if it works for me, I can get anyone to believe that it worked. FOI. No credit, no blame. Accept your positive experiences without taking credit and you have humility. Accept your negative experiences without blame and you have serenity. Attention. Your attention is a tool of your awareness. Your energy is like sunlight that you can focus by using your attention like a magnifying glass. The great value of the past is wisdom gained from your experience and pleasant memories. Everything else is excess baggage that handicaps the enjoyment of the trip. Yesterday's aches, pains and problems are not a burden here and now unless you brush them with pattern design. Virginia's existence consisted of getting through one crisis after another, all of them self-induced. She became so skilled at kicking herself in the ass that she hated to give it up no matter how much it hurt her. Glowing with unhappiness and misery, she explained her bad karmic patterns to anyone who would listen. Her co-workers tired of their consciousness shrinking conversations with her. One of them prepared a poster for the office wall where Virginia would see it every time she began relating her troubles. It said, "Anytime you are in a pattern that produces unhappiness, you will continue that pattern until you learn the obvious lesson in it." Designed for a /an// operated a and //iker. 0/** RNS MIDIOTLS. Subject, A Siondina on P/AI form co, J pulls firmly on string, D, O judgs, passes Iruk pulti O, and acti kept to loves Rafa. Opposing force, ever/a J boot 0, RO make precarad, Anta, OC high as contact C kumpki either. George's teaching in Zen, there is little emphasis on God or on Buddha because the focus is on becoming one with your experience. Anything that keeps distance between a person and his or her awareness of individual responsibility is a barrier to enlightenment. Even prayer can be a cop-out. Or as George said, don't bother God. He's got his own problems, everything he makes dies. Coming to terms with death. You who are reading or hearing this now will die. The death rate is a constant 100%. Although the naturalness of death is basic, our cultural bias tends to treat it as an unexpected and foreign intrusion. If you embrace the concept that you will have your body as long as you need it, you can enjoy it. Rejoice in the fact that it is completely recyclable. The body has the wisdom that it is not needed forever. That wisdom can become a working concept in your life. Dimensions of life. The only dimension of life over which you have limited control is the length. By putting your attention on what you do to extend your life, you can utilize the potential you have for its duration. But be aware that every day you control the depth and width of your experience, your life. Madness. The mad are persecuted because so many find it hard to love them. As for madness itself, it is the feeling that we can't love until we have time. Until we love, we will never have the time. The inmates. When you first realize that you are surrounded by crazy people, it may seem frightening. In a civilization of outpatients, insanity can be viewed as the only defense. The planet Earth is your asylum. Take the opportunity to explore and enjoy your own craziness. Joanne's enlightenment. When her daughter was born, Joanne pledged to herself that she would not lie to her child. The discipline involved in answering the queries of an alert, intelligent youth was more than Joanne had anticipated. Nor had she realized that to fulfill her pledge she would have to stop lying to herself. By adhering to the truth, she went through many intellectual, physical and emotional changes that led her along the path of enlightenment. The names of Ho Chi Zen. Addressing a group of students, Ho Chi Zen said, heretic, charlatan, rascal, trickster. I have been called all of those names and they're true. All true. I am here tonight to trick you. I'm going to trick you into becoming your own best friend. 3. The Zen of Sex. Sex and nirvana. The orgasm can be considered a model of enlightenment because, for its duration, the experiencer and the experience are one. The possibility of attaining nirvana through sex may be denied by some teachers who maintain that reality simply is and therefore is not something to be attained. In the ecstasy of complete sexual union, roles, images, and abstractions are dissolved in the oneness of the experience. 7/I. An immoralist once fogged the issue of his own behavior by focusing attention on the sex life of others. This distraction works so well that some people are just now realizing that morality is how you treat other beings, not your sexual behavior. Ben on human sexuality. A student once asked Ben how to resist the animal in herself. Ben said, that which is resisted persists. What are you resisting? Well, you know, the animal passions. You mean sex? Yes. That's so ironic. Most animals, except dolphins and humans, have a limited season of heat, of open sexuality. The constant readiness for sexual fulfillment is an unusual characteristic found only in species with large brains and high intelligence. Whatever it is not animal passion. Your intelligence is so you can handle, enjoy, and appreciate your uniqueness, not deny it. $******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** on sexual freedom, many members also enjoyed psychedelics. The combination of sex and drugs became a religious practice. Although detractors referred to this rite as total blasphemy, one believer said, "There may be a better way of worshipping than turning on and bawling, but this will do until I find one." When asked why he formed his group, Judd replied, "An angel came to me in a vision and told me that I was to be the next great religious prophet in this world. I asked the angel, 'Why me?' And the angel said, 'Because you are so goddamned gullible.'" In a discussion about liberated sexual attitudes, Jerry explained that, to her, liberation meant using sexual activity to satisfy sexual desire. Through this framework she avoided being exploited or exploiting anyone else. One woman asked, "What do you do in a sexually free environment when someone accuses you of not being sexually liberated because you won't sleep with them?" "I tell him that I'm so sexually liberated that I make it with everyone who turns me on, and when I'm horny and there's no one around with the style I like, I feel perfectly free to masturbate without guilt." Chastity and other perversions pointing out that accepting oneself is a primary step in liberation, Ho-Chi Zen advocated sexual freedom, doing what you want to do with those who are interested in doing it with you. One student asked why some gurus and prophets stress celibacy as a prelude to enlightenment. Ho explained that such may have been necessary in the pre-birth control era just to keep the time for oneself that having children would require. That was why liberation was sought only after the child-rearing period was finished. As for me, Ho said, I agree with Anatole France, who said that of all the perversions, chastity is the strangest. What if everybody did it? An unshackling of the spirit caused Joanne to exercise her sexual freedom and explore her sexual identity. When an acquaintance said, "You can't do that. What if everybody did it?" Joanne replied, "It's all right with me if everyone does it." A cure for paranoia. Rachel met Ed at a self-help lecture. Liking the way they responded to each other, they went out for coffee, then to Rachel's apartment where they shared a smoke of Acapulco Gold. Before much time had passed, they were deep into each other's heads. In response to Rachel's question about where he was coming from, Ed described the former life he had abandoned. During the description, he saw for the first time how full his life had been of form and how empty of substance. Seeing his past as a horror show brought Ed his first attack of paranoia. Realizing what was happening to Ed, Rachel put her arms around him and pulled him close to her, saying, "That was then and this is now. That's where you were coming from, not where you are." The warmth and closeness of Rachel brought Ed out of his reverie and into the present. Sensing her emotional openness, Ed asked, "Are we going to make love?" Rachel replied, "Of course. I'm no tease." Ed's paranoia never returned. Jenny's liberation in action. Among Jenny's lovers was a married man who was unaware of how chauvinistic he was. In order to avoid ridiculous complications, Jenny explained that she took responsibility for her own sex life and made love with whom she pleased when she pleased. Unable to grasp the implications of her freedom, her lover asked, "But what if I wanted a monogamous relationship?" Jenny replied, "I'd advise you to seek one with your wife. Isn't that what she's looking for?" Alberto's insight. Because Alberto had not learned to believe in himself, he took pride only in those things he was born with: religion, ethnic heritage, skin color, etc. Thinking that he would find fulfillment by imitating the male role his culture pushed, Alberto became a stereotype instead of a person. When the pressures of this imitation of life became too much to bear, he began searching for a better way to live. He studied Gurdjieff for a while, narrowly mistaking up Scientology, and finally found himself in Zen. One of his women acquaintances noticed the change in him and asked him how it came about. He explained that he had learned that machismo was Latin for insecurity in action. Ben's Romanticism. Having been reared in a household full of logic and popular music, Ben was a romantic rationalist. His embrace of Zen didn't change his views, but widened them. When asked by Jane what his framework was for dealing with sex, he said, "I look at each sexual relationship as the possible beginning of a deep and beautiful friendship. If it turns out to be less than that, I accept the limitation, although I don't prefer it." Jane liked that approach, but said that so many of her friends seemed obsessed with monogamy. Ben replied, "Oh, I think monogamy is great as long as it's spontaneous." SJ-M4 Ho Chi Zen and the Dragon Lady. Ho Chi Zen despaired of ever finding a partner whose enthusiasm for the 10,000 imperial acts of sex would match his own. As soon as he gave up his search, a new partner appeared in his life. They discovered that they were astonishingly compatible. After their first 5 days and nights of unstinting erotic activity, he said to her, "You are just what I always wanted, a dragon lady to fight by my side." She said, "But we have not conquered anything yet." "Right on." Ho cried. "Perhaps we never will." 4. The reality of illusion. Reality. In a discussion, Bird said that reality can be described in many ways, but the description that an individual accepts is the one that conforms to that individual's preconceptions. Omar expanded on this by defining objective reality as the fantasy that has received the majority vote and subjective reality as a personal fantasy. Mike concluded the discussion by saying, "Reality is the original Rorschach rhyme. Good news, bad news. There's good news tonight. And bad news. First, the bad news, There is no good news. Now, the good news, you don't have to listen to the bad news. Illusion and Reality. Expounding on his knowledge of gurus and their systems, Ralph said, any system that prepares you for enlightenment by a description or a non-description gives you the tools to build the illusion of enlightenment. If this is done with skill, it is perhaps impossible to tell the difference between the illusion and the reality. Lucas replied, perhaps there is no difference. Zen sense everything is true in some sense, false in some sense and meaningless in another sense. A working knowledge of this concept is a useful tool for staying relaxed. For example, if someone says something about you that is untrue, you should not get upset regardless of whether you consider the statement positive or negative. It is true in the sense that it is what one person believes to be true about you, it is that individual's truth. It is false in the sense that it does not represent your truth. It is meaningless in the sense that it does not change who and what you are, your identity is independent of others' opinions. Identity risk. Among the masks and roles of your everyday reality there is a genuine human being living a life. Speak out. Ask for what you want. There are only two risks attached. The first is that asking will let both you and others know who and where you are. That is necessary for learning your real identity. Second risk in asking for what you want is that you might get it. The clock. When Omar inherited a clock from his grandfather, he placed it in a prominent position on his bookcase, even though the clock did not keep accurate time. He enjoyed it and was not disturbed when it refused to continue running. The clock became a focal point for conversation. Hey, that clock isn't right, is it? Omar, your clock has run down. Does this clock work? One day Omar told Giovanni that he was considering having the clock repaired, not because he wanted it to keep time, but because he was tired of discussing its inaccuracy. Giovanni went over to the clock, removed both of its hands, and wrote now across the clock face. Time orientation SSS? The past is just a memory and the future is a S*E guess. The point where they meet is the present, and CFIPS it is the only place you exist. The address of where you live is eternally now. 8. B3 Open secrets. All secrets are open secrets. Nothing is hidden. Nothing is revealed. People can only be told what they already know. Although they know, they may not be conscious of their knowledge. Imagination. Imagination, like logic, is a valuable but limited IG tool. No matter how much imagination you have, life is always much simpler than you could ever imagine. Cause and effect. It is easy to pick any event that precedes another in time and define the first as the cause and the second as the effect. Such definitions may be difficult to disprove, but that does not ensure their validity. Sometimes such a combination will be presented as common sense when it is merely stupidity hardened into a bad habit. TFBELIEF and creation. Today I heard about a new thing called what a carrot mores. I now believe in what a mores. If you can be 5 live in what a mores, and if we can form a mutually acceptable definition, we will discover large amounts of circumstantial evidence proving the existence of what a mores. When we believe enough, there will be JJL what a mores. Do we really want any? Science and magic are frequently different maps for very similar territory. Following the path of least resistance, science ignores magic's hard-to-travel path. Magic uses myth and science uses ambiguous terminology. Semantically, both say the same thing. Each principle is expressed as an unknown something is doing we don't know what. Each law is a variation of, it did it again. Ken's truth. Endowed with a psychic gift, Ken was able to determine what kind of an emotional space a person was in by any physical contact. The experience happened every time he touched someone, regardless of whether he wanted the experience or not. Looking for a way to dampen the unpleasant aspects of his talent, Ken became a heavy drinker. When alcohol failed, he went to tranquilizers and then to heroin, to avoid living his life. After a number of years as a smack freak, he went into a rehabilitation program to cure himself. Successful at last, he left Synanon and began making his own way in the world. As he expressed it, what I had to learn was to associate only with those people who I felt comfortable touching. A mystical experience. Just as Mary was beginning to lose consciousness on an operating table, she received an illuminating glimpse into the essential nature of things. With a prodigious effort, she mentally summed up her fantastic insight in a dozen or so words, which she shouted to the white masked faces around her before going under. When Mary came out of anesthesia, she could remember neither the words nor the vital truth they had expressed. She asked her doctor, "Did I say something just before I passed out?" "As a matter of fact you did," the doctor told her. "What was it?" "Well, you just sort of mumbled. Nothing coherent. None of us could make any sense out of it." Wisdom within you contain myriad worlds and vast knowledge. Each one of your cells has the ability to recreate itself and the ability to change. Although many of the processes that take place within you do not seem to be under your conscious control, that does not negate the fact that they are part of you. Your ordinary consciousness is a small part of your being, merely a current majority opinion resulting from your experience. If you invest your identity in your opinions, you are limiting your capacity and your reality. Solving the mystery. If life seems to be a mystery, the solution is in your mind. It may not always be easy to find the solution, but it is there, perhaps hidden or disguised in symbols or myths. The truth of the Atlas myth is that each of us is holding up the world with our shoulders. For it is in your head that the world you perceive is created. Knowing that may be the first step in recognizing that the world is not a burden, but a part of you. Freedom and the law. All of the laws that identify victimless crimes are the result of someone's anxiety. These laws don't limit your freedom, but necessitate caution when you exercise it. The great challenge in contemporary culture is being free without becoming the victim of others' anxiety. Lunacy. To be called a lunatic is a compliment to anyone who recognizes a better position than the one taken by allegedly rational human beings. Therefore, if there cannot be lunacy for all, there should be at least equality for lunatics. To those who are accused of being on the periphery of the lunatic fringe, all things are possible. It is on the outer periphery of the lunatic fringe, beyond lunacy, where the cosmic mystery is unfolding. Inflation. It may seem, in times of inflation, that all prices are going up, but the price of living remains the same. Death. It may seem like a high price to those who don't understand it, but it only has to be paid once, and never in advance. Art and the artist. Every human being is an artist. The work of art in question is the individual's life. Most artists have a problem knowing when they have completed a work, but if you realize that your life is your art form, you don't have that problem. Death tells you when you are through. It's nature's way of saying, "That's it. You've completed your work."